योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचाम् मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So in the previous session we completed the sutra and the bhashya for 3.51, which was Sthani Upanimantrane Sangasmayakaranam Punar Anishta Prasangat. Now we move on to sort of a different topic with Sutra 3.52. The sutra is kṣaṇatatkramayoḥ saṃyamādvivekajaṃ jñānam. So let us look at the meaning of these terms in the sutra and then let us look at the bhashya. So kṣaṇatatkramayoḥ saṃyamāt means through the saṃyama, and by now we know what is saṃyama, on kṣaṇa and tatkrama. So kṣaṇa means the moment. In the context of this sutra, we can take it as the smallest unit of time. Krama means sequence. So by the saṃyama on kṣaṇa, the smallest moment, the smallest unit of time, and the sequence of moments, their krama, by the saṃyama on that, what is the siddhi? The siddhi is vivekajaṃ jñānam. It is the jnana, the knowledge, cognition, understanding that arises from viveka. Viveka is discernment, discrimination, viveka khyati. That is something we have already looked at multiple times in different chapters, but most recently we looked at it in 3.49, where we saw sattva purusha anyata khyati matrasya sarvabhavadishtatritvam sarvajñātritvam cha. So when there is a khyati matram, an understanding of the difference between the purest sattva, the antakaranam, the purest form of the chitta, and the purusha, then the siddhi was said to be in Sutra 3.49 to be sarvabhavadishtatritvam sarvajñātritvam. So complete lordship over each and everything and complete understanding of each and everything. So that vivekajaṃ jñānam, this sutra, vivekaja means born out of viveka. So this sutra sort of provides an alternate way for that same jnanam, which is the siddhi from viveka khyati. And in that sense, it is quite interesting as to what is being said. And when we look at the bhashya, we will also look at some of the related aspects of the yogic explanation of the word. So that is kshaṇatatkramayoḥ saṃyamādvivekajaṃ jñānam. From the saṃyama on the moment and their sequence, that jnanam which would come from viveka or viveka khyati is available or comes about as a siddhi. This is also said in another text as kshaṇakramayoḥ saṃyamat sakshatkarya paryantat vivekajam jnanam vivekena itaravyavrittataya jayamanam sarvam vastunam jnanam bhavati iti arthaha. So this is an elaboration of the same sutra that says kshaṇakramayoḥ saṃyamat, by saṃyama on the moment and the sequence. So what is saṃyama? Sakshatkarya paryantat. So sakshatkarya paryantat. So until to the point, because that is where the saṃyama comes, where complete direct understanding, direct realization arises in the chitta of the yogi, and that is sort of the result of the saṃyama. So when that direct perception happens, then what happens? Vivekajam jnanam means vivekena itara vyavrittataya jayamanam sarva vastunam jnanam. So this is where initially it was, I said, viveka khyati and the siddhi arising from that. Here also a slightly different shade of explanation is given, where vivekena means itara vyavrittataya jayamanam sarva vastunam jnanam. The knowledge of each and every entity as understood by recognizing that special aspect of a given entity compared to all other entities. So this is a more technical explanation of the term, and that is why I thought I should be giving both. So here vivekena means by discrimination, by say, okay, this entity, when I say I have understood, I have obtained direct perception, by also being able to recognize how this entity is different from every other entity. That is itara vyavrittataya jayamanam sarvavastunam jnanam bhavati ityarthaha. So that is vivekajam jnanam in that context. So you get to know each and every entity in itself completely as being different from every other entity. So that is a complete understanding of that entity. So this is the siddhi arising from sutra, from the saṃyama, and this sutra and the next sutra together will help us understand what is being said around this subject. So after looking at this, now that we have understood the terms in this sutra, next we will be looking at the bhashya.
So the षणतत्क्रमयोः saṃyamat. Now this seems to be something kind of shifting to the delineation or flow, but that is not really the case, because we just concluded on the siddhi, which is a kind of supreme form of siddhi, the jnana siddhi. And it is such a kind of siddhi, therefore yogi gets allurements from celestial beings, because they also envy him, or they have great reverence for him, regards for him, for having attained what he has attained. So that vivekaja jnanam, the sattva-purusha annatakkhyati, is the ultimate acme condition of knowledge, final plane of knowledge. And with the final plane of knowledge comes, there is something also which comes out of it. And that is called vivekaja, coming out of viveka. So one is viveka jnana, and now there is also vivekaja jnanam, coming out of vivekaja, coming out of viveka. So therefore yogi is now making an object, subject matter of which we don't really bother about it so much. We are caught in the paranamas in the universe, the changes, the manifestations in the universe, and these manifestations take place on the belt of time, flow of time. So the the concept of time itself has been objectified, and which is a unique thing. We otherwise don't bother about considering the time objectively, don't study the time. We only know the time, we use the time, we want the time to flow, and we want to take advantage of the flow of time, but we don't really go into inquiry, and the time is a metaphysical factor and of which we are not at all aware. We are only aware of chronological time, and we are and psychological time, but there is also metaphysical time, and that becomes the subject matter of saṃyama, kṣaṇatatkramayoḥ, the moment and its flow, its succession itself becomes object of saṃyama, rather than any object or any grahya tattva, any grahana tattva, and any grahitru tattva. Here the time itself is object. So this, in grahya tattvas, we don't really bother about the time factor. Although we speak about time and space everywhere, we don't go into deeper inquiry about very concept of time. We just want to know the time. And we do not want to know about time. This is what happens in mundane gravity for we people. And therefore, this is a fascinating sutra coming up. And it is because of this supreme plane of knowledge. On that plane, something should not be escaping. And this usually escapes in our process of knowledge. And therefore, this is a very interesting sutra that has come up. It should be understood that because of the highest siddhi, jnana rupa siddhi, kriya rupa jnana rupa siddhi is having fully bloomed and blossomed, the yogi gets the inquisitiveness for this inquiry. He wants to know this aspect itself, which is eternal. As the time, the space is boundless, the time is eternal. Time stops nowhere. Nothing stops time. The time has never ever stopped. So what is that? The time which is eternal, which will never stop, has never stopped. So that is a very interesting inquiry that comes upon higher plane of knowledge pursuit, and that is what in this sutra is coming up. So it is only possible by saṃyama. We can't have empirical process to understand knowledge. I want to see the time, I want to analyze the time, I want to investigate the time, and then the empirical faculties will not really be qualified to do that, and therefore this is a unique instrumentation which yogi has at his disposal, which is called saṃyama. And by the saṃyama, he is now getting knowledge which is vivekajaṃ jñānam, which is quite interesting topic. Vivekajaṃ, as I explained, it is born out of viveka. It's not only having viveka jñānam, but the vivekajaṃ jñānam, and that is explained out in the sutra that follows. So it's a fascinating subject matter which we have embarked upon. Okay.
So now we begin with the bhashya. As Vyasa, we look at how he explains it to us. So Vyasa begins, he says, Yatha apakarsha pariyantam dravyam paramanu evam parama apakarsha pariyantah kalaha kṣaṇaha. So he begins by explaining what is kṣaṇa by drawing an analogy to things in the material realm. He says, Yatha apakarsha pariyantam dravyam paramanu. So any dravya, any material entity, when it is considered in smaller and smaller pieces, divided into smaller and smaller pieces, the smallest atomic unit is known as paramanu. So one thing we have to note here is that this is considered in the realm of material entities made up of the Prithvi, Ap, Tej, Vayu, Akash, the five elements, Mahabhutas. This is not in the context of changing that, so it is not in the context of Tattvantara Parinama. That is a transformation from, or the evolution process, or the reverse, where the bhutas are said to come out of tanmatras and so on. So it is an atom as it is normally understood, where any entity, when considered in its smallest unit, is said to be the atomic unit, that is referred to as Paramanu. This is just like a material entity when it is divided further and further and further and considered to be Paramanu at the smallest condition. Similarly, says Vyasa, Apakarshan Paryantaha Kalaha Kṣanaha. So when that is done with respect to time, the smallest unit is kṣanaha. So that is kṣana. Then he continues, Yavatava samayena chalitaha paramanuhu purvadesham jayat uttaradesham upasampadhyete sakalaha kṣanaha. So again, the kṣana is described in terms of movement. So this kind of explanation also reminds us of some other ways of explanation used in physics, for example, where it is said that here Vyasa says that the time for a material atom to leave its previous location and come to its immediate next location, the time taken for that is kṣana. So the time is defined in terms of motion. The smallest unit of time is defined in terms of the smallest motion of the smallest particle, the paramanu. So that is kṣanaha. So purvadesham jayat uttaradesham upasampadhyete. The paramanu moving from its previous position to its next position. The time it would take is what is kṣana. Tat pravaha avichhedastu kramaha. So tat pravaha means the pravaha of the kṣana. So the flow of these moments without any break is referred to as Kramaha. So that is Krama. So the sequence of moments without any break, so with continuity, that is referred to as Kramaha. So in the sutra which began with षणतत्क्रमयोः, Vyasa has explained to us what is kṣana and what is its krama. So what is the krama of kṣana? So tatkrama. Now Vyasa continues. He says, षणतत्क्रमयोः नास्ति वस्तुसमाहारः इति बुद्धिसमाहारो मुहूर्त अहोरात्र आदयः. So Vyasa is going a bit further, just as we have seen so often in Vibhuti Pada, where a sutra sort of opens the door to explain and establish a certain siddhanta or the yoga darshana. So the sutra refers to something and the bhashya will use that to establish a certain doctrine or a certain explanation of some kind of a concept as accepted by the yoga darshana. So similarly here, Vyasa is delving further into kṣana and krama and their nature. So he is saying, षणतत्क्रमयोः नास्ति vastu samaharaha. So he says there is no concept in actual reality of a collection of moments or a sequence where the whole sequence of moments is available together in this world. Such a thing simply doesn't happen, because one moment goes away, the next moment becomes the present. So there is no condition where multiple moments are there together. So that it is not a vastu samaharaha. So it is not a group of entities that exist in actual reality at a given point. And therefore, he says, nasti vastu samaharaha. And then buddhi samaharaha muhurta ahoratradayah. So any longer intervals which is said to be a collection of moments such as this period or day and night, etc. These are buddhi samaharaha. So these are conceptions which are of the mind. So these are conceptions of the mind because that grouping doesn't exist at a given time, that you can't touch something, you can't show something and say, okay, this is a collection of time, because that doesn't exist in a form that is available complete as a group in reality. Therefore, Vyasa explained that it is a buddhi samaharaha. It is a mental conception. When we say day, it is a certain abstract conception. And then he says, Sakhalu ayam kalaha वस्तुशून्यो बुद्धिनिर्माणः शब्दज्ञानानुपाती लौकिकानां व्युत्थितदर्शनानां वस्तुस्वरूप इव avabhasate. So he says, therefore indeed this kala, so this period, this interval of time, things like day, night, month, etc., they are vastushunya. So they don't have a actual physical real manifestation at a given time. Buddhi nirmanaha, conceptions of the mind. Shabda jñānānupāti, that arise from the Shabda jñānam, from a certain description, from a conceptual description that is stated. From that, the notion of day, night, etc. is a mental construct. Laukikanam vyuthita darshananam vastu swarupa iva avabhasate. For normal people who are not yogis in samadhi, but normal people who have a vyuthita darshana, they are sort of in the world. For them, even though this is essentially a mental abstraction, a mental conceptualization, it appears to be real. Vastu swarupa iva. It appears to be a vastu, a thing. So for example, a ball is a thing, a fruit is a thing, but a collection of moments, it doesn't exist as a thing at a given time. But for a person without the refined thought and understanding of a yogi and without the samadhi condition, it appears as though that is real, day, night, etc. Real as in, it appears as though it is a thing like everything else. And so this will also remind us of the when we were looking at chitta vritti, etc. Shabda jnananupati vastushunyo vikalpaha. So that is the same terminology is being used here. So kalaha, ayam kalaha, vastuswarupa iva avabhasate. Now having said that, Vyasa clarifies, he says, kṣanastu vastupatitaha, kramavalambi, kramakscha, kṣaṇanantaryātma. So then, having firstly dispelled the idea that these periods, intervals, etc., are actual, real things that exist at a given time, like a fruit and a ball and a pot would. But he still clarifies that that is not to say that everything is false. He says, kṣanastu vastupatitaha. So the kṣana, the moment itself, is vastavam. So it is real, exists in the present, exists at a given time. Kramavalambi. It is that on which the krama depends, because the sequence, the succession of moments is something that kshana forms the foundation for. It is the moment on which the sequence of moments or the krama is built. Kramascha kṣaṇanantaryātma. So what is this krama? Krama is actually made up of the succession. So the concept of the preceding moment and the succeeding moment. So that succession, that is what the krama is made up of. So Vyasa now he is saying that kshana is very much a real thing, accepted in the yoga darshana as a real thing, and the krama is actually the fact of there being a preceding moment and a succeeding moment. It's about something that comes just before and something that comes just next. Then he says, Tam kala vidaha, kala iti achakshate yoginaha. So it is this thing that the yogi calls kala. So yogi understands kala as firstly being made up of moments, where the moment is a real entity available just like any other entity, and the krama is the notion of every moment having a preceding moment and the moment that comes next. And the krama is made up of that. This notion is then understood by the yogis to say this is kala, or this is what we refer to in English as time. So here Vasa is explaining how the kṣana and the krama has to be understood from the point of view of a yogi or the yoga darshana.
So, as I said, the time is concept or the idea that comes in the sutra here is fascinating, interesting. It's also intriguing. Now, to point out this, the fascination that I spoke of just a while ago. See, the time is quite strange, funny, intriguing, but we really don't recognize this aspect in the time. The time is quite plain for us. What is the difficulty? What is intriguing there, and what is fascinating about the time itself? We have fascination in time, not about the time, but in times. So the concept of time is described, and Vyasa begins to explain what is the infinitesimally finite unit of matter, which is referred to as paramāṇu. All matters in their infinitesimally finite unit, smallest of the small unit of that is called atom, and then paramāṇu. Paramāṇu. So what paramāṇu is with reference to any matter. Similarly, about the time so spoken as kṣana is infinitesimally finite unit of time. The time is gone dividing years, months, days, hours, minutes, seconds, and microseconds, etc. We go on dividing the time, but there comes a phase that you cannot divide the time further. So the indivisibly smallest unit of time, possibly the smallest, infinitesimally finite unit of time, means which cannot be further divided. Like we can divide an hour into 60 minutes, we can divide a minute into 60 seconds, so on and so forth, or a year into 365 days, etc. Now, this kṣana, the moment, as it is in metaphysics, the concept of it in metaphysics is that it is infinitesimally finite unit of time. Now, we in our worldly life are not bothered about this pure concept of time. What are we bothered about? We have time concept in terms of seconds, minutes, hours, months, years, decades, century, millennia, etc., etc. What is this time for us? Now, the time that we are familiar with is actually fictitious. It is vikalpa. It really doesn't exist. But still, everything exists in time for us, which itself is not real. That's why Vyasa makes it clear that it is vikalpa. Shabda jñānanupāti vastu shunyam. So you should recall the Vikalpa Sutra, which was discussed earlier in the first chapter. Now, what is our concept of time? Actually, our concept of time is not at all pure time. We have a chronological concept of time, and you will realize that we are not at all considering the time purely. It is something else that we are considering and calling it time. We call that as a time, and therefore, the Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunyaha. What is the time? See, our time is what? Seconds, minutes, hours, days, etc., etc. What is that actually? our day is the time taken by Earth to go around its axis. Now, why the Earth goes around its axis, and why the Earth goes around in an orbit to Sun? It's all gravity. It is because of gravity the Earth is having axial rotation and orbital rotation. So it's all play of gravities. In what way gravity is related to time? Nowhere the gravity is related to time. Gravity is gravity. Now, what is our time? It is time taken by Earth to go around its axis, which we call it as one day. Then we divide the one day into 24 hours. Each of the hour is divided into 60 minutes. Each of the minute is divided into 60 seconds. So actually, the reference or relationship of the seconds, minutes, hours, day, etc. has something to do with the axial rotation, which has something to do with the gravity inherent to the Earth. It is the Earth which decides the axial rotation velocity. If there is change in that gravity, Earth can complete an orbit in 20 hours. Less time than it is taking now, or more time than it is taking now. So if it takes more time, our day will expand. If it takes less time than it is taking now, the day will contract. So it's all gravity with which we are speaking, and that is the time concept for us. Therefore, there is a metaphysical concept of time, which is spoken of in metaphysics and in philosophy. So our time is gravity. We actually refer to gravity. Then Earth taking those 365 days to go around the Sun, it is because of the gravity of the Sun on the Earth. If the gravity gets modulated, maybe Earth will take more time. For same orbit, same distance in orbit, it can take more or less time due to change in gravity that is exerted by the Sun on the planet. So actually this is all game of gravities, and we are relating our concept of time to gravity, which is not the pure concept of time. Time is time. And now here we are introduced to the metaphysical entity of time. That is infinitesimally finite unit of time. It really doesn't matter whether it is on Earth or Moon or Sun or another galaxy elsewhere. That's not the case in our system. What is a day of the Earth, and what is a day of Mars, and what is a day of Saturn, what is day of Jupiter are all different. It all depends upon their axial rotation, and what is year depends upon their orbital rotation. And therefore we are relating the time, or we are imposing the time on the function of gravity, manifestation of gravity. So that is the unrealistic aspect of the time. Therefore it is vikalpa, it is vastu shunya. It really doesn't exist. The time in the sense we understand or we consider or we believe in really doesn't exist. The pure time is moment and succession of moment. So that unit will not change whether it is Sun or whether it is Earth or whether it is anywhere in the galaxy or outside the galaxy or in the universe or outside the universe. The infinitesimally finite unit of time will not change. So metaphysics deal with pure time, and we don't deal with pure time in our worldly life. So that's the intriguing thing the moment we are introduced to metaphysical aspect of time. And it is fascinating as well, therefore, because what we believe in time is not really the time. Then another thing he tells us about the succession of moment. The unit of the time that is spoken of as the kṣaṇa which is, as I repeatedly said, infinitesimally finite unit. Now there can be no collocation. So it also gives us understanding that a minute is not made up of 60 seconds. A minute is not made up of 60 seconds, but a minute happens after 60 seconds. An hour doesn't contain 60 minutes. But after 60 minutes, 1 hour happens. Whereas we are all used to this belief, a blind belief or unpragmatic belief that 1 hour means 60 seconds, 1 minute means 1 hour means 60 minutes, and 1 minute means 60 seconds. It is after 60 seconds you get a minute duration, because you cannot be having collocation of seconds. You cannot put together 60 seconds and say it is minute. It's a flow of 60 seconds, and it is such a flow that there can be no collocation. You can't collect. You can collect money, you can collect matters, you can't collect time. So that also is another thing which Vyasa clarifies, that there can be no collocation. Like vastu, while like an object can be collocated, money can be collocated. Today I have 1 rupee, you can go on collecting 1 rupee, it can become 10 rupees, it can become 100, it can become 1,000, it can become 10,000, so on and so forth. But that is not the case of time. The time fades out. So the time as such doesn't exist. And there's a wonderful example that is given sometimes to explain we commoners about the time. Say, suppose I'm drawing a line on a blackboard. I can draw a line which is 3 inches, 5 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, 25 inches. I can draw a line. And then you say this is a line of 24 inches, this is a line of 50 inches. But suppose I draw a line on a blackboard with my right hand, and I go on effacing that line with the left hand. When will you get 20 inches of line? You won't get, because the line is being effaced. On the other hand, while I'm drawing the line with the right hand, I'm effacing it by the left hand. So even if you give me 100 years, I will not be able to draw even a line of 1 inch. Whereas if I try to draw a line, because the previous dots remain, you can say this is a line of 1 inch or 10 inches. But suppose it is being effaced, then you cannot get even 1 inch line in 100 years or 1,000 years or million years. So that's how the time is, the succession of time. It gets effaced on one hand, because the moment comes and goes. Moment doesn't linger, it doesn't stay on, because it is infinitesimally finite unit of time, and there is a succession of the moments which gives us some duration of time. But if you go for microscopic inquiry into it, the moments don't stay. Moment comes and go, new moment comes, new comes, old is gone, and therefore you don't get really a linear time concept in one dimension of thought here. So that's why this is a very fascinating aspect, and there is quite an amount of Maya of which the philosophers are used to speaking about. And even here, Vyasa brings that by saying it is vastu shunya but shabda jnananupati. It's a verbal delusion. Vikalpa, if you recall, it was described as verbal delusion. And that's the Maya. The delusion is the Maya. And the time is one of the great principles which is infested by Maya. So that's why it is a very fascinating topic that we are embarking upon. The more I say, much needs to be said. Therefore, I think I should not be saying much about it, but one should think about it. What is really time? that there is no collocation of movement. Then how do you get, if there is no collocation of second, you should not get minute or hour. But we say 3,600 seconds is 1 hour. But where do you get 3,600 seconds to collect them together? You can't collect. You can't collect 60 seconds for 1 minute, or 60 minutes for 1 hour, or 24 hours for 1 day. The time factor cannot be collocated, and that Vyasa has brought to our notice. So there is much to investigate into what Vyasa has said for our own comprehensions. Anyway, the more I say, more confusion might come up, and therefore I will not say much about it. I'll just let a worm into your brain for you to really ponder over the real time concept, metaphysical concept of time, and chronological and psychological concept of time. Okay.
So there is one thing to clarify here. So when it is said Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunyaha, so that doesn't necessarily indicate that it is untrue or false. Okay. So even that holds in the context of Vikalpa as well. So this is a classification of the types of knowledge that arises in the Chitta. And this type of knowledge is distinct from Pramana, Viparyaya, etc. So the way, just to be sure we don't mistake it, we have to be careful to understand that this is the kind of cognition arising from a verbal or a oral description based on words and language, and which doesn't exist as a thing. Okay, that doesn't mean it is false. So it is a mental conception, a concept, a construct, an abstraction, etc., which does not exist as a thing in the world. So that is vastu shunyaha. And therefore, whatever arises from this kind of a conception has to be recognized as such, so that it is not taken to be true, nor is it dismissed as false. So it is something to be analyzed, and it has its own use as a mode of, or a means to understanding, or having a model of something, etc. So similarly, here it is said that the kala, or the aspects of durations, okay, where ahoratra, muhurta, etc., like it was just described, it is not a thing that physically exists in the sense that physically exists at a given time or place, but it is more of a mental buddhi nirmana. It is arising from the grasping of it by the buddhi, and that is what Vyasa is putting forth. And yet there is something that exists definitely, and that is kṣaṇa. The moment definitely exists at a given time. And not only that, the relation between a moment with its previous one and the next one, those two things definitely do exist. And then every other concepts built out of that is based on these two fundamental things that definitely do exist and recognizable as a thing, as a vastu, and the rest follow from it. And this is the refined understanding that the yogi has, because he says iti achakshate yoginaha. Further, Vyasa continues. He says,
and one more. In pure Vedanta, Maya is not false or untrue totally. If you say true, it can be argued. It's untrue, it can be argued and disproved. That's how the Maya in pure Vedanta is, because Maya is from the Almighty. If the Almighty is truth, what comes from Him is also truth. It cannot be untrue. And therefore, if you recall, while we are dealing with Satya, the truth, we spoke about that class as called Vyavaharika Satya, Pratibhasika Satya, Paramarthika Satya. So it is not, the truth is not taken away from the concept of time when it is Maya, but if it is this, it also can be that. If it is that, it also is this. like pratibhashaka satya, vyavaharika satya, and paramarthika satya. All are true. Maya is also true. It is not to be rubbished as untrue or dubbed as untrue and rubbish it. That's what a very mysterious thing about Maya, and therefore Paramatma Ishwara is called Maya Dhipati. So if he is true, what comes from him or what is of him, it cannot be untrue. But what grade of truth? We have seen the Rutam, Satyam, Vyavaharika Satya, they are all true. So time is not altogether untrue. When it is Maya, it is also true, because everything exists in time. Everything happens in time. All that is phenomenal and true for us, and true essentially too, happens in time. So Maya is a very intriguing term. In pure Vedanta, it has been usually postulated. In idealistic Vedanta, it has been put into delimitations. And Maya means it is dubbed as something non-existent, etc. That is not true. So it's a very intriguing concept, and the time is part of it. Metaphysical time is totally different than chronological or psychological time. Okay.
So Vyasa continues, he says, Nacha dvau kshanam saha bhavataha. Two moments don't exist at the same time, or two moments don't exist together. Kramascha na dvayoho saha bhuvoho asambhavat purvasmat uttarabhavinaha yad anantaryam kshanasya sakramaha tasmad vartamana eva eka kshano na purvottarakshaнаः santi iti. So as usual, like in this text, Vyasa, Patanjali, they are very careful to ensure that things are defined so that they are coherent, well defined, and complete. And a lot of these terms, they carry overloaded meanings from various usages that we learn, normal usage in words, etc. So they are taking the pains to clearly define certain things, like is done in mathematics. So here it says two moments, dvau kshano na saha bhavatah, they don't exist together. Kramascha na dvayoho saha bhuvoho asambhavat, and therefore the krama, because two terms don't exist together, the krama itself does not exist. Purvasmat uttarabhavinaha yad anantaryam. So the krama is not a sequence in the terms that it's a collection of continuous moments. The better way to define it, or the more technically sound way to define it, would be the relation of preceding and next. So preceding and succeeding. So that relationship, purvasmat uttarabhavinaha yad anantaryam. So that relation of, and this is the word relation as used in maths and allied subjects like computer science, etc. So that relation of anantaryam, the concept of this is the previous, this is the next. So that relation, anantaryam kshanasya, that is what is kramaha. So we define that as kramaha, says Vyasa, so that now both these terms have a definition that really do exist, that are vastu, so vastavikam. So they have arrived at a definition which can be clearly established, is not a mental construction, because the moment it is that, then one has to analyze whether it is correct or wrong and so on, and there can be a lot of arguments. But when you define it in a way where it is readily existing and available, then the fact that they are well founded is directly established. So kshana and the krama has been carefully defined here, so that there is no question of the fact that those are existing entities. And therefore, tasmat vartamanaha evaika kshano na purvottara kshanaah santi. So at a given time, in the present, there is only one kshana, one moment, and not the previous one or the next one. Tasmad nasti tat samaharaha. Therefore, a group of moments as an existing entity, that does not exist. Ye tu bhuta bhavinaha kshanaah te parinamanvita vyakhyeyaha. So now one might ask, okay, that is fine, only one exists. But what about the previous and the one that is yet to come? What about those moments? So he says, Yetu bhuta bhavinaha kshanaha, those moments that are either in normal terms, things of the past that have already happened, or bhavina that are yet to happen, then they are to be defined as parinamanvita. So those are those that constitute, so they sort of exist in the transformations. So they are that common aspect that figures in each and every transformation. Each and every transformation itself is different, but there is a commonality among all transformations, which is the commonality of time. So the bhuta and the bhavina, the bhuta and the bhavi, the kshana that has happened or they're yet to happen, are to be defined. Vyakhyeyaha means are to be defined by saying that they are parinamanvita. So they are those that exist through the transformations. So in all the transformations that happened at a certain time, and when we say at a certain time, we are already using that. The thing that commonly existed was that moment. So the moment of the past, moment of the future can be defined in terms of the parinama, the transformations. So this is slightly difficult to convey in words because the moment we start elaborating, it starts sounding confusing. But there is a lot of clarity in this if we think about it. It says, okay, these are terms that need to be defined, past moments and future moments. But how do we define? Because definition is always based on something else. So what is the something else that is available for use? And then Vyasa identifies that something else that is available for use here is transformations. So the definition of past moment and future moment can be done by saying that it is that which commonly existed in all the transformations. So that parinamanvita vyakhyeyaha. I hope I've tried to give the flavor of the style of careful thinking that is going on here. Because if kshana is defined by using kshana itself, then it becomes a circular definition. So you have to look at another well accepted notion on which to build the concept of the past kshana and the future kshana, and that commonly accepted separate notion is parinama, the transformation. Therefore, the kshana is parinamanvitaha. Okay. So now, tena ekena kshanena kritsno lokaha parinamam anubhavati. So that one moment that is under focus in our discussion, either the present moment or the past moment. So a given particular moment under consideration, in that one moment, the entire creation, kritsno lokaha, the entire creation, parinamam anubhavati, underwent transformation. And there is always some transformation in Prakriti, as we have seen. It is dharma parinama, lakshana parinama, avastha parinama. So there is always some transformation, but the entire creation together underwent a transformation, and that happened at that one moment which is under consideration. So tena ekena kshanena kritsno lokaha parinamam anubhavati, experienced transformation. Tatkshanopārūಢāः khalu ami dharmāः. So the dharmas, the attributes, the characteristics are tatkshanopārūಢāः. They are sort of riding on that moment. So they are sort of sitting on that moment, and that is how through the transformation that dharma, the characteristic, came about. Tayoho षणतत्क्रमयोः saṃyamāt tayoho sakshatkaranam. So now with these two things, the kṣana, which is a certain thing, which is a moment, and krama, which is the relation that defines the previous moment and the next moment. So these two things, kṣana and krama, on the saṃyama of these two things, so tayoho, this is a dual case. So in other languages there is singular and plural. Sanskrit also has a dual. So therefore, to refer to two things, there is a different form of the noun or the verb. So here the dual form is being used because kṣana and krama are exactly two entities under consideration. So tayoho kshaṇatatkramayoḥ saṃyamāt tayoho sakshatkaranam. So by saṃyama on those two things, what happens? sakshatkara of those two things happen. So sakshatkara means direct perception. So in the buddhi, in the chitta, direct complete knowledge arises. So for example, if I look at a pen in front of me, there is sakshatkara because it's a direct, it is not explained to me, it is not indirectly inferred. I'm directly seeing it and that cognition has arisen in my chitta. Similar direct perception of the kṣana and the krama arises through the saṃyama. Tatascha vivekajam jñānam pradurbhavati. And from this, the vivekajam jñānam arises. So this is ending at a sort of mysterious point because we can understand that there is kṣana and the krama, and from that saṃyama, because when you do saṃyama on anything, there is a sakshatkara of that happens. That is what saṃyama is all about. So when saṃyama and kṣana and krama, there is sakshatkara of those two. But then this next sentence, tatascha vivekajam jñānam pradurbhavati. From there, the vivekajam jñānam arises. And the commentary ends here. And now we would wonder, okay, kṣana and krama, we got the sakshatkara of those two things. But why does that lead to vivekajam jnanam? Because vivekajam jnanam, which sarvajñātritvam, knowing each and everything, that was the siddhi. How can that arise from the kṣana krama saṃyama? That is something we have to think about. Now, from wondering about that, there is a text that elaborates also. And so I'll sort of go through that so that can also be made clear. What is the relation between this kṣana and krama and then the vivekaja jnanam? So here, now the bhashya is over. I'm quoting from another text where it says, Sarva vastu pratikshanam parinamate iti vikaritaya kṣanarupameva. So this is interesting. So each and everything in this creation, at every moment, it undergoes parinama, transformation. And therefore, vikaritaya, from the point of view of transformations, everything is made up of kṣana because all the transformations are happening in a given moment. And therefore, each and everything, vikaritaya kṣana. So the kṣana is pervading each and everything. It is part of each and every transformation. Now, I will skip a few parts. Then it says, Janya bhinnam cha asman mate pradhanantam karanam karyakaranayoho tadatmya sambandha angikarat. Okay. So essentially, the cause and the effect are one. Now each and everything is undergoing transformation in a given kṣana. Ataha kṣanakramayoḥ saṃyamah karyakarana sarva vishayakaha iti. So essentially now we have to see how the kṣana and the krama is going to sarvajñatvam, complete jnanam of each and everything. Why? Because kṣanakramayoḥ saṃyama is actually the karyakarana sarva vishayaka. So each and everything in the creation undergoes transformation at a given moment. And each and everything is, the cause and the effect are one and the same. Okay, so that is a fundamental tenet. Or the one can understand the effect by understanding the cause and so on, because it is just a different form of the same thing. Now each and every transformation is happening in a given moment. So once you have saṃyama of a given moment, and not just the given moment, also the krama, the relationship between the previous moment, the next moment, and the given moment, that gives you an understanding of the transformation of each and everything. So essentially, when we say kṣana and krama saṃyama has happened, which means the complete set of transformation in the entire creation with respect to that kṣana as well as the relation between that and the previous and the next kṣana. The entire sakshatkara has happened. And now, if we extrapolate to understand this, we say, sakshatkarya parantat sarvesham vastunam jñānam bhavati iti yavat. So now, because kṣanakrama saṃyama has happened, as part of understanding or sakshatkara of kṣana and krama, there is a natural sakshatkara of each and every transformation that happened in creation, as well as the relation to the past and previous moment, which means each and everything has been completely understood. Because every entity, every modification and the transformation is in the scope, is in the ambit of this saṃyama. And now we understand how that leads to sarvajñākritvam, because nothing is missed, whether it is a certain animal somewhere, a certain atom somewhere, a certain, say, molecules of water, a river, each and everything underwent transformation. That has been part of the sakshatkara. Furthermore, the relation between the past and the future, the preceding, succeeding, also is part of the sakshatkara. And therefore, the complete understanding has arisen. And this is nothing but the same siddhi in the context of the viveka khyati that was mentioned, the sarvajñākritvam, through a different mode that sarvajñākritvam has arisen here. And now then we can understand how the sakshatkara of the kṣana and krama will lead to the vivekajaṃ jñānam. And then Vyasa has very tersely concluded that by saying tatascha vivekajaṃ jñānam pradurbhavati. And we have to sort of think over it and then refer to certain text to then draw the link between the kṣanakrama saṃyama and the sarvajñākritvam of the entire creation that can arise from that. And with this, we see how kṣanakrama saṃyama, here we have understood how to very carefully think and not be too prematurely convinced that something is conceptually sound without analyzing it, and then how to arrive at very careful definitions. And then further we understand how the kṣana and the krama, because they pervade each and everything in terms of parinama and transformations, the sakshatkara of kṣana and krama eventually leads to sarvajñākritvam, which is the same sarvajñākritvam, which is vivekajaṃ jñānam, that would arise from viveka. So that completes Sutra 3.52 and its bhashya.
So in this sutra, Vyasa has shown his articulative skill, because on one hand he said, Shunyoapi buddhi nirma shabda jnana anupati on one hand, and in the statement of Vyasa which you just now heard from Srineet, which is ye tu bhuta bhavinaha kṣanaha te parinam anvita vyakhyayaha, he shows that it is not untrue, although it is shabda jnana anupati, it is true. It is because that is why this kṣanatatkrama saṃyama is a saṃyama object. Now, saṃyama object cannot be untrue. And what is coming out of it is a sakshatkar. Now, sakshatkar will never happen to something non-existent. So, this sutra, the topic of sutra is very, very, very intriguing. That's why, as I said in the beginning, because our idea of time, there is untruth. The time as it is in metaphysics is completely true, absolutely true. And that is why kṣanakrama is a support of saṃyama and samadhi. And outcome of it is the sakshatkara, whereby yogi is called kalavit. So just to give you little clarity here in this little complicated topic is, see, in our real time motion, we fail to see so many things. And today, therefore, we have taken recourse to slow motion photography, because real time motion will keep so many actions and motions veiled, and therefore when we play in slow motion, what could not be perceived becomes object of perception because of slow motion. So yogi is just as with a video camera and technology, we are able to see the same event in a slow motion and then catch certain realities which otherwise are veiled for our vision. Similarly, yogi is able to have similar such thing, whereby he will get hold of certain details because of slow motion. We cannot slow down the time, but we can slow down the motion, and that advantage we take with the technology. So here, yogi is able to see all those changes crystal clear because of his timoscope. All that misses for us in our empirical perception, just as we miss many things in our perception where it is a normal motion or real-time motion. And real-time motion, to perceive it critically, we try to put it under slow motion. And there many things come to our knowledge. And therefore the parinama comes to grasp of a yogi in an exalted way because of this षणतत samyama. Just as today with the video photography, we can go for slow motion and get certain things for our perception, and we can realize so many things. Yogi has sakshatkar of all those things which in real time escape our grasp. So with analogy of present time video photography, I am trying to make you get hold of what is being mentioned and what will be following this. As you just now heard, why this vivekajaṃ jñānam and with what avail? Because these certain things which cannot be caught by empirical process are caught. Just as vision catches certain things, not in normal real-time motion, but in slow motion. And therefore, it's enormous realm of knowledge that opens out because of this kshaṇatatkramayoḥ saṃyama. And therefore, being support of saṃyama, it cannot be unreal. So it is not shashashrungavat. It is not shashashrungavat. This is clear in Vyasa's comment. Although he says it is shabda jnananupati vastu shunya, yet it is not shashashrungavat, like horn of a hare. It doesn't exist. But it is not that kind. And that way, in these two statements, Vyasa tries to do the balancing act to really understand this very mysterious concept of time. For us, it is not mysterious at all. The time is not mysterious at all for us. Whereas in metaphysics, the time is very mysterious. And it's a great resource for knowledge, which you will know what kind of knowledge is in the sutra that follows. Okay.
Okay, we'll stop for today. Cover the next sutra in the next session. So let's recite the shlokas on Guruji and stop for today. वैज्ञानिकं प्रवक्तृत्व आसनेषु कलाविदं योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञं वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुं योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.